Thank you. Thank you. What would you die for? Have you ever thought about it? It's kind of a strange question. What would you die for? It seems so hypothetical, so far off in the future, one hopes. To me, it conjures up these imaginary scenarios, these emergencies in my mind. Crises where I'd be required to sacrifice myself, heroically, of course, for my ideals. Would you die for love, freedom, your country, your family? Of course, it's not a very fair question. It assumes too much. It assumes we'd be able to choose the manner in which we die. And of course, most of us won't. I think it's a far better question if we flip it on its head and ask instead, what would you give your life for? Because we can choose the way in which we live. And many of you are facing this question right now. What are you going to do with your life? What are you going to do after high school? What job? What career? What college? What major? And the adults in your life, they want to know that you have the answers, or at least have a plan. Never mind the fact that your generation, by current estimates, is going to change careers some 10 or 15 times before you're done. To say nothing of your personal trajectories, your choices. It's really a question of identity building. Who do you want to be? What kind of life do you want to live? And adolescence, as we all know, is an intense period of identity building, as it should be, as it is for all of us. But here's the thing, it shouldn't stop there. These are the important questions in life, and they need to be asked and answered repeatedly as we grow. And if you do this, you'll notice the questions change. Instead of what would you give your life for, it's what will you give your life for in your 20s. Because you realize now that you will die. You've shed that immortality feeling you have as a teen, and you realize that everyone you know will give their lives for this thing called life, and that your choices do matter. It's kind of like a tree that you're climbing, the tree of your life. You select certain branches to climb, hoping they'll lead to where you want to go. And some branches you don't climb. And you don't really know. Some of the branches you'll climb up tomorrow don't even exist today. The dirty little secret is that we all make it up as we go along. And the branches you didn't climb, the ones behind you, you can't go back and climb them later. It's a one-way trip. Your choices are important. And then the question changes on you again, midlife and beyond. It's not what would you give your life for or what will you give your life for. Now it's what are you giving your life for? Because suddenly you realize you're doing it. You're in the thick of it. You've made a lot of choices, and here you are. And at this point, many people will ask, sometimes for the first time, am I the person I wanted to be? Am I living the life I wanted? And they might not like the answers very much if they're just asking these questions for the first time. And so, we call it a midlife crisis. And many people in a midlife crisis will seek to inject the extraordinary in their lives. But they haven't got the practice. What does it mean to have an extraordinary life? What does it mean to have extraordinary experiences? How do you do extraordinary? Well, that's exactly what we're studying in my group at the University of Colorado. And we've come up with a set of 7 characteristics that extraordinary experiences seem to have in common. And I want to share with you 3 of them today, I think especially important, especially for you younger folks. The first one is control. What we find with people who've had extraordinary experiences is they've managed to internalize control of their lives inside them more. You see, when we all start out in the same place, the locus of control is external to us, right? Our parents make all the decisions. And then gradually we start to make our own decisions, but those decisions we make to please our parents. And later as we're teens, we make decisions to please our friends. But it is the essence of coming of age that we start to make our own decisions, that we seize control of our life, not waiting for an invitation to do this or permission from outside, but reaching out and seizing control. It's literally seize the day, carpe diem. Thank you, Robin Williams, wherever you are. But it's not just carpe diem, it's carpe sui. Seize the self. And it's a skill. It's a skill that we can develop and master, and the sooner you start, the better at it you'll be down the road. The second one is the social and emotional group that you surround yourself with. This is your inner circle that you choose. These are the people closest to you in your life, and they will determine to a great extent what you do in your life. In fact, they will determine what you think it's even possible for you to do. We call it a sense of agency. These are the people who will support you when times get rough, and times will get rough. Or they won't, depending on who they are. These are the people who will set you up to succeed or to fail. And if you've internalized this locus of control, you'll be better able to pick who gets into your inner circle, who's lucky enough, who's important enough to be that close to you. It's a skill. And the third one, perhaps most important, is this: risk. Physical risk, intellectual risk, emotional risk. In all cases, risk is nothing less than the ability, even the desire, to embrace the unknown. That's how we learn. We risk, we fail, we risk again until we succeed. The problem is we live in a risk-averse culture. We don't teach those skills and how to recover. We don't do risk very well. Why? Because risk is tricky business. When I was in my early 20s, I went on a whitewater rafting trip, organized by my friend Shiloh and her father. A whole bunch of us went. Beautiful country, the Green and the Yampa rivers in Utah. Maybe some of you have been there. Dinosaur National Monument. Near the end of the trip, we came upon the biggest rapid in the river, Warm Springs Rapid. At this time, it was spring runoff, so it was a Class 5 rapid. So I'm talking 10, 12 feet of white water, a wall folding back in and on itself, a big hole in the middle. Most of us wisely decided to portage our boats around this thing and put in downstream. But not me and my friend Scotty. We decided to take a risk, take a chance, and shoot that rapid directly in an inflatable canoe. But we weren't totally crazy because two others of our group had done it just before us, and the same boat, and they came out unscathed. Okay. But they were experienced and we were not. My job was simple, paddling in the back. Keep the boat straight as you go into the hole in front of the rapid. But as we got closer, I became more and more frightened. All I could see was this growing wall of white, foamy, frothy violence filling my field of vision. All I could hear was this thunderous roar like a dragon wanting to devour us. And just before the boat goes into the hole, it goes a little bit askew. I failed in my only simple job to keep the boat straight. And then Scotty, who's in front, he disappeared into this curtain of white water. And an instant later, I was enveloped in the same crushing, most enormous pressure I'd ever felt in my life everywhere. I lost my hat, my sunglasses, my shoes, the paddle, the boat. I was thinking, I got to get those things back. Of course, there's no way I'd ever be able to get these things back. It seemed like I was underwater, holding my breath for an hour. It was probably only seconds before the thing spat me out the other side, completely disoriented. I saw somebody running along the bank with a rope. They were throwing it at me. 3, 4 times, I finally grabbed it, and they towed me into shore. And at that time, finally, I caught sight of Scotty on the opposite bank, and he was being rescued, thankfully, by one of our kayakers. She was towing him. He was holding onto the little loop on the back of her boat. And as I watched Scotty, suddenly the kayak towing him went straight up vertical in the air, because Scotty hit a submerged log across the chest, breaking 2 of his ribs, but more importantly, folding him in half over that log and trapping him against the current. He couldn't get out, and he was underwater. He held his breath for as long as he could, and then he couldn't hold it any longer, and he gave up. There was nothing else to do. And only then, when his body relaxed, did the river sweep him out and up to safety. Whew. Well, after we recovered, we managed to hike back up to the rapid just in time to see Shiloh and her dad shooting the same rapid, but in a bigger boat, the pontoon boat. Her dad was on the oars driving, expert raftsman. She was sitting atop this big pile of dry bags, like Max from How the Grinch Stole Christmas, the dog on top. She was like a wild rodeo woman on top. Woo! And this perfect, sunny, brilliant day, someone described it later in slow motion, as the boat goes down into the hole in front of the rapid, and Shiloh is flung up into the air. and then suddenly down into the water. And the tip of her ponytail just touches the surface of the water. And as the rapid throws her back up into the air, a perfect crescent of water droplets shining like jewels in the sunlight as she lets out this scream of sheer joy. I experienced a disorienting, frightening experience. Scotty had a near-death experience. Shiloh had a blissful, joyous experience, all from the same risk. So later it was time for us to pack up our bags and our 5 or 6 cars and make the long night's journey back to Denver. And we were exhausted. And sometime during that night, in a car behind me, Shiloh's dad fell asleep at the wheel. And in the resulting car crash, Shiloh was killed. Just like that. We thought the risk was on the river. It was also on the road. It's been almost 25 years since that day, and I still think about it a lot. But I think about it differently now because I study the nature of experience and risk. And I think about the risks we take intentionally, strategically, on purpose, to grow. And the other kinds of risks that adrenaline junkies take, reckless, abandon, to brag about. But this wasn't either kind. This was the kind of risk that we ignore, the kind of risk that is around us all the time. We don't see it because we're so accustomed to it. We're so rutted in our routines. But the truth is, risk is all around us every day. That's the nature of this life. To live at all is to risk dying. Shiloh's death that way didn't mean much. But the way she lived meant a great deal, even and especially that last week. The 3 things we were just talking about. Control. She was seizing control of her life. At that time, we were all coming of age, our early 20s. The social group she surrounded herself with, that group that bonded so well on the river, I'll never forget it. And the risk she decided to take with her father on that rapid, and the reward of one of the most glorious experiences of her short life. Like the story I just told you, ultimately, all of our experiences, yours and mine, they're all transformed into narratives, the stories of our lives. And these stories are who we are. They form our identities. And that's, by the way, how we study identity. We study the narratives, the self-stories or the identity narratives of people to find out who they think they are. And this is a precious concept because it implies that we are the authors of our experiences, the narratives that result, and the identities that we forge in our lives. I had a teacher friend I've been working with for the last 2 years named Christy, an inspired woman. She taught me something very important last summer. She said, attitude is the difference between an ordeal and an adventure. And to that I would only add this, attitude plus the skills to do extraordinary. And I urge you to develop that attitude and use those skills to make your lives into adventures. Thank you.